Have you ever thought about making your own wine?
Well, if you have, we're going to show you exactly how to do that today. Hello everyone, this is Dwayne.
And Lori.
And this is Edge of Nowhere Farm. Now, you guys may or may not know, but we have a 6-acre farm here in the Arizona desert. We've got over 180 fruiting trees, vines, and shrubs. And in that list of vines, one of those would be what?
Grapes.
Yes. Now, we have both table grapes
and wine grapes.
The grape we're talking about today is actually not technically a wine grape.
No.
It's a table grape. But we love the way this tastes, and whenever you have a good tasting grape, you should get a
good tasting wine.
At least that's the hope. One of the great parts of being here in the desert is we do have some wonderful grape varieties that grow well. Thompson grapes in particular. There used to be some large vineyards in and around town, and folks used to make their own wine. So this is not actually new. How many grapevines do we have?
Well, we have 46 in the back, and then we have 5 up front, if you want to include those.
So that means over 50 vines.
Yeah.
Plus the little one over actually in the berry cane patch. So we just finished harvesting our grapes, what, a couple weeks ago?
Yep, beginning of July.
Beginning of July. And that's about the same time that they're ripe most years for us here in Arizona. Now we have 6 Thompson grapevines growing here on the farm. We went ahead and harvested everything all at once. We wanted to give you guys an idea of how to make this wine from fresh grapes. In fact, before I forget, I'm going to link a playlist here that actually shows you some of our old winemaking videos. This one will be a little different, but it does cover how to start wine from start to finish. We do a lot of different things with fruit wines, grape wines as well, but this one we wanted to use fresh grapes. One of the things that you appreciate, I know, is a clean and tidy house, right?
Yeah.
So with these grapes, we did want to go ahead and give them a nice bath. We have a large trash can that we also use for fermenting. It's a food grade can, basically. So we scrubbed down these grapes and went ahead and brought them in for processing. Now, what do we do for processing?
We basically just take the grapes off the stems. The Thompsons are not like perfect, so there's a lot of stems in there as well, but we just want to get the majority, the big bulky parts of the stems off.
Some grapes we actually freeze, so we try to get all the stems off. One of the things about a white wine is you don't use the skins on the grapes, at least not traditionally. So we remove those by first going through and juicing them, just a regular old juicer. Now here we also have a juice press. So we actually took the pretty wet scraps that happen in a juicer, we put those through the press. Now, if you don't have a press, that's okay. Using any type of wine bag, the mesh bags would actually work just fine. It'll take a little bit longer to get the water out, and you won't get all of that juice out of there, but most of it will still come out. I think we wound up with an extra half a gallon or so of juice because we had that press. Now, how many pounds of grapes did we have when it was all said and done?
We had about 50 pounds of grapes.
That's right. In fact, we know we have 50 pounds of grapes because it's on our winemaking notes. Yes, we're that anal. So we had 50 pounds of grapes. Now when we had all of those basically pressed, what was the total amount of liquid that we started with?
We ended up with about 3.5 gallons.
So out of 50 pounds of grapes for our Thompsons, that's how much actual fruit juice we had. If you have grapes and you have a certain amount of wine that you're looking for, you can add some additional water to that. In fact, sometimes we do. We had plenty this time though at that amount. And also we're gonna be adding some additional sugar. Now what we first do is take a specific gravity reading. That will tell us about how much alcohol or potential alcohol we might get out of our wine. When we started out this batch of wine, our initial specific gravity was 1.090. That initial specific gravity would give us about how much alcohol if we just let it go without adding sugar?
About 12%.
Okay, so our Thompson grape wine would be about 12% alcohol, give or take, if we didn't add anything else to it.
Correct.
So we could go with that. But that's not how we roll around here. We want it a little bit stronger.
Yes.
So in order to do that, we need to add some additional sugar. Now we found that the best way to do that is actually a syrup, right? But it's a concentrated syrup. So traditional simple syrup, I think, is a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to water. What we use is a 2-to-1 ratio of sugar to water. So there's not quite as much water going in there. So we utilize that in order to raise the actual potential alcohol by adding additional sugar. Once we had done that, what was our specific gravity reading?
It was 1.134.
We always try to get our wines to between 16 and 18% alcohol. So that's roughly about 17%, right? That's a good alcohol content for us. Keeping in mind that during the process of making your wine, you may actually end up watering that down a bit by adding some water to top off your fermenters and things. One last thing we do, because we're adding some water in with this wine, is we test the acid content or the pH. So we take a pH strip, dip it into the wine, and just make sure that we're somewhere between 3 and 4% acid. In this case, we were right in the middle of that range, and so we were just fine as far as acid content. So if you're getting above a 4 on a pH scale, you're probably gonna wanna bring that down just a little bit. You can use an acid blend, especially if you've added a lot of water. You probably will need an acid blend to get that back down under 4. So last thing we do is what?
We add Camden tablets.
Right. So that's used to actually disinfect the must, so your grape, in this case, juice. You want to make sure you don't have any wild yeast or bacteria in the wine. The bacteria is probably the bigger problem of the two, but we use that to kill off both. We want to start from scratch before we add our wine yeast. So now we use 2 different types of yeast here with pretty much every wine that we make. What are those 2 types?
They are the Premier Cuvée and the Premier Blanc.
So because we have our alcohol content between 16 and 18%, and we want to try to hold that as best we can, we use both of those yeasts. We found they're very effective at making sure we have a very strong fermentation, and it fully attenuates, which simply means the yeast is able to consume all of the sugar, so we get that alcohol content that we're looking for. For our wine yeast, we do start those. The instructions on the packet is what we follow. Basically what you do is take water that's between 95 and 100 degrees, you add your yeast into that for about 20 minutes, and you activate that yeast before you add it to the wine. Now, we're pretty warm here in the house, especially during the summertime, which is when we do all of our winemaking and fermenting. If it's a little cooler, that yeast may need some help, especially to get started. So we make sure we do that. You can really see the difference once that yeast activates in the water, and you know that it's ready to go once it hits the juice. So now that you're about 12 to 24 hours after adding the Camden tablets, and that's important, you want to let them do their job and then have that basically off gas, so it's not going to kill your wine yeast. Once that happens and we start our yeast, we usually add what?
A yeast nutrient.
Yes. Now, grapes do a very good job of feeding yeast on their own. However, we want to make sure that our wine has a nice strong fermentation. So we figure a little bit of extra caution to give it a little extra food because, you know, we're in America. We like to eat a lot. We want our yeast to do the same. So once the yeast has been added, we usually leave it alone for the first 24 hours. We don't touch anything, but we do check it at 24 hours just to make sure we've got some fermentation and don't have any issues with it being stuck. In this case, 24 hours in, you could see we started to get a little bit of bubbly at the top of that. We do always stir our wines at least gently during that primary fermentation, mainly because we want to make sure we don't have any mold growing on anything that might be floating at the surface of your wine. And also at this point, the yeast is creating a tremendous amount of carbon dioxide, and so oxygen being added at this point is not a problem. We're not concerned with that. After the first 48 hours, at that second stirring, you really see that we had the wine starting to ferment nice and hard. Seeing that bubbling is exactly what we're looking for. So we always have our primary fermentation go about 4 days. Every once in a while it goes to 5, but what we're looking for is just the fermentation to slow down just a little bit, and then we know that it's time to rack it into the secondary. So the way we do that is pretty simple. We take a bucket and we put a mesh liner in there that you can find from winemaking online. In fact, most of the things we're talking about you'll find in our Amazon shop. We use that in a bucket and we pour the wine into there, realizing that there are going to be yeast residues at this point, other impurities that might be in the wine, like pieces of stem, there might be some pieces of skin that are left in there, and then again some yeast. That bag does a pretty good job of taking most of that out for you, and then you have your wine. So now it is time for...
Secondary.
Correct. So secondary or secondary fermenter, that's where the wine's going to spend pretty much the rest of its life until it gets bottled. We prefer to use a couple different types of fermenters here. The Monster comes in 3 and 6 gallon, and also the Big Mouth Bubblers in 5 and 6.5. So last thing we do is we do keep all of our fermenting wines in our closet.
Yes.
In our wine closet.
Our wine closet.
Yep, we've got 11 batches of wine so far that we've started this season, and this is one of those.
Yeah.
So we have that in there. We keep it nice and dark. We will check on it every day just to make sure we don't have anything overflowing, but for the most part, it sits there for, what, about 30 days or so?
Yeah,
right?
At least.
So we re-racked this about 3 days ago. The airlock is critical at this point. You do want to limit the amount of air that's getting into the fermenter, but at the same time, you want the carbon dioxide to be released. Now, this will take about 30 days or so to completely attenuate or ferment completely. Once it does, it's going to clear up really well, and you're going to have a lot of sediment. And I don't know if you're going to be able to pick it up on camera or not, but we already have some sediment forming on this one, as well as the 3 gallon. So it's already starting to have yeast that's essentially dead or dying and falling to the bottom of your container. Eventually, this will clear up. You'll have a nice thick layer of sludge down here. That usually takes about 30 days or so. And what we'll do is we'll go through, and at that point, we'll use a racking cane and re-rack the wine to remove it from the lees. That's what that sludge layer at the bottom is called. Then what we do is we leave it in that same wine closet for another 30 days minimum. At this point, you actually could leave it in that container if you wanted to. You could consume it if you wanted to, but we prefer to do a little bit of back sweetening and let it age. Now, the key is we allow this to sit as long as it needs to clear up. We want to have a nice clear wine. And so sometimes we'll leave it for up to 3 months in that secondary fermenter before we go ahead and degas the wine. That's remove any excess carbon dioxide out of the wine. We don't want it popping any corks. We will also back sweeten it. So add some additional sugar because we prefer our wines a little off dry, almost semi-sweet, or a medium wine. And we will then go ahead and bottle those wines. Now with 4 gallons of wine here, we'll probably wind up with about the same after re-racking and back sweetening. We'll probably still wind up with about 4 gallons, and you get about 5 bottles of wine per gallon. So in this case, we're gonna have, let's see, math again, 4, 5, 20 is the last time I checked. So we should have 20 bottles of our vintage 2023 Thompson wine. So we wanted to give you guys some general guidelines, not necessarily a recipe, because ours are always a little bit different. And one of the things that we actually do because of that is we keep a record of all of our winemaking notes, right? In fact, you made the folder for us.
Yeah, I made the folder just so we had it all separated. We can reference back to it really well.
We've had some really good wines and we've had some horrible wines.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've done, what did we say? I think we've over 30 batches of wine that we've done at this point, including the 11 batches we've got going now for this season and a couple left to go. But we have found that some of them turn out really well. Some of them don't. Some of them have too much sugar and are a little too sweet for us. And sometimes they're just way too dry. Yeah. So we take those notes, we want to know all the details so that the next time we go to make the wine, we have at least a reference point that we can use, and we have our own recipe at that point that we can follow if we found one that we really, really like. Because let's face it, you're making your own wine, you can make it taste exactly how you want it. Yeah. Make it as sweet as you want or as dry as you want to, and anything in between. Yeah. So all this talk about wine makes me want some.
Then let's have some.
I say we do. So this is our Thompson wine from actually 2020. This is from the old farm, the grapes were. So this has been sitting now for a couple years. So hopefully you guys can see that. It's just a beautiful, beautiful, clear white wine. Making sure that you let that sit for a little extra time to get nice and clear. That's what we prefer. Not critical, but we prefer it to be nice and clear. Cheers. That's really good. It's got a nice punch.
Yeah. It's that high alcohol that we tend to do.
Yeah. So now, I can definitely, obviously it just tastes like a white wine. You can definitely tell that without the back sweetening, this would be dry.
Yes.
Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah.
I would say it probably tastes more like a Pinot Grigio. I wouldn't say as strong as a Chardonnay. Chardonnay is really
Really
dry,
yeah.
and harsh. I wouldn't say it's that. I would say off dry as far as sweetness. Definitely not overly sweet. Got a nice crisp finish. You don't have the tannins in there that you have in a red wine. We have a lot of red wines that we make. This one doesn't have that, so it's got just a nice, really crisp, clean finish. I like that.
Yeah.
In a white wine. Pairs really good with chicken or fish would be fantastic, or just drinking. Straight up. That's how I usually enjoy this.
Yep.
Wow, fantastic.
Really good, yeah.
Really good wine.
Much better than our first one that we did.
The one that popped all the corks and blew up in our faces? Yeah, I'd say it's better too. I'm pretty sure that's in our notes. Blew up in our face.
It didn't blow up in our face.
It popped all those corks though.
It did.
We had to drink that book quick. So just want to thank you for joining us today. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. We cover a lot of things here on this newly established functioning farm and would love to see you on a regular basis. If you have any questions or comments, those go in the
Comment section down below.
and our Amazon shop. I'll leave a link down in the description. That is a free, painless way to help support the channel. If you start with the link down below, it doesn't matter what you buy, you help to support us here. And most of the things that you see us using here in our winemaking videos, you'll find in that shop. So just want to thank you for joining us today and remind you, if we can farm on the edge of nowhere,
So can you.
all right, another round. So since it's after noon, this doesn't count as day drinking, right? I think that's the legalese of that.
If it's afternoon, like after 12
After 12
p.m.?
o'clock, it doesn't count as day drinking.
Okay.
Yep, that's the official word.
All right. Do you want to do it where I say, have you ever thought about making your own wine? And then you come in and say, well, that's what we're going to show you today or something like that.
I think so.
Okay.
You gotta get all smiley though. None of this, have you ever thought about making your own wine? Ooh, actually, you know what? If you do the little, we'll all like that. Try that. Just be sexy towards the camera.
You can't tell me that.
I could say something like, make love to the camera, blah, 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 blah. That's just a bunch of nonsense. That's what she would say.
It's kind of weird that you keep looking at me and I'll look over and then I'll turn this way and then you look again.
I know, I feel like I need to at least talk to you
Like-
sometimes. Be like this, I don't know what to do. Let's straighten that up again. There we go. Hey, look at that. There's a green label.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and reset it because we're getting a little punchy. We've got something around 50 vines here,
Well,
and
46 plus 5, that's 51, so 52 vines.
okay, we have 52 vines. Maybe I'll learn how to do math. It's a good thing all of our notes say math, numbers. We haven't even started drinking yet.
No.
The grapes that we're using today, we harvested what, about a couple weeks ago?
Yeah,
right?
beginning of July.
That sounds
That's
right.
not a couple weeks ago, is it?
Yeah, it is.
What is the date?
Today's the 9th. Do over. It was a couple weeks
Well,
ago.
if I
End of
said
June.
beginning of July, that's not
You're
2
gonna have
weeks
to.
ago.
I know how you are. You're very exact. You're my little baker, so it has to be.
Exactly.
Has
If
to be.
I'm saying a couple weeks, that's 2 weeks, and that would have been in June.
Okay, so there we go. So with this one, we actually have a large food grade trash can that we also use for fermenting for our larger batches. We use that this time to get some scrubbing done.
Stop looking at me.
I can. We're just. It's okay if I
I
do.
know,
It's just
but it's just like,
Maybe that's why the guy was saying, "Hey, stop looking at your wife." I'm like, I can't help it. She's gorgeous. All right,
Sorry,
I'll
I
stop
didn't.
looking at you.
no, I didn't. I wasn't saying like you have to completely stop, but you're literally like this.
Honey, I can't take my eyes off of you. I don't know what to tell you.
I know, but I feel like I have to look at you, and then I'm going like this.
Hey, I'm really sorry that you have to look at me.
No.
But every once in a while, it's nice, okay?
I didn't say that.
You literally said that, but that's okay. You said something along the
You
lines.
took
We can-
it wrong.
Nah, I take it. My mind taking it wrong. So one of the things that you love about being in the desert is the is the fact that you're always cleaning the house.
That's not true. I'm never cleaning
You
the house.
don't. You're a wonderful farm wife, a housewife. One of these days,
I don't have time to clean.
you don't.
What are you gonna say? One of these days I'll get around to
One of
cleaning?
these days you'll get around to cleaning. So that 1.134 gets us to what?
I think it was right about 17.
Yeah, it literally is off the charts. Does it continue on the next page? Nope. So we know we have that. That's all I got. I got nothing else. We have not started drinking yet. Both of those are Red Star yeasts. Those have a very, very high alcohol tolerance, which is good because you do as well.
Wow.
It's higher than mine. I'm just telling the truth at this table.